Hello, my name is Abigail and welcome back to Polyglot Progress. Today's video is one that I have been really excited to make for a long time, and it's also been one that I know a lot of you have been really excited to see for a long time, and that is that I am going to review 4 of the Teach Yourself German books. So obviously this is not the whole series. I have not used the Language Hacking with Benny Lewis book. I haven't used some of the older books like Improve Your German or whatever the old version of Enjoy was. Teach Yourself as a company just has so many different book series, and there are so many editions of German books in all of those series. So I just haven't gotten around to using all of them, and in some cases I don't know if I will because I've already kind of used equal products. However, I have gone through Complete German, German Tutor, and Enjoy German from start to finish, cover to cover, and I'm also going to touch very slightly on the German Verbs book, this one that I don't think they really sell anymore, but I do have, so I figured I would toss it in here. Definitely my review of the German Verbs book is going to be more of a little bit of bonus content. I'm really going to be talking about those first 3 books a bit more, but before I do that, I just wanted to put in 2 kind of disclaimers. The first one being that obviously we all learn differently, we all like different things in textbooks, we all like different products, we all are at different places in our language learning and stuff. I'd say just reviews in general. Take from them what you feel like is similar with the language learner. Like if I feel like I learn really well based off of a certain thing and you know that you work really well with that kind of thing, maybe a review where I talk about a book that has that is the perfect book for you. But in general, just kind of take everything with not necessarily a grain of salt, but just kind of look at it also through your own perspective lens and not just go with things just because I have said so, because we are not the same person. And then my other disclaimer is that I am going to be talking about the German editions exclusively of these kinds of books. And I have used other Teach Yourself books for other languages, and I can say that what happens in the German tutor book and what I like and dislike about the German tutor book is not necessarily what happens and what I like and I dislike in the Italian or the Spanish tutor books. And the same thing is true with Complete, with Enjoy, with literally every single one of these books. With the exception of, I guess, the Benny Lewis language hacking series from Teach Yourself, you aren't getting the same author for all of these textbooks. They're picking someone who is like a German professor or a German linguist or something like that to be able to help write these books. So there's going to be a completely different person that's working on the Spanish books. You're going to get kind of completely different stuff. Obviously, the series are mapped out in a way that they're going to be quite similar, and the layout is going to be quite similar. Teach Yourself obviously planned out what they're doing. They're not just completely different books, but there is going to be some variation, and also languages are different. They have to touch on different things. They feel like different things are more important, etc. Different things I feel like work better for different types of languages. So just in general, I would say that if I feel a certain way about one of these books and you're not interested necessarily in using it for German, just know that your experience might be a little bit different. At some point in the future, I would like to make a video kind of reviewing the tutor series as a whole, because I am on my 3rd book in it now. I'm working through Italian, I've already done Spanish, and obviously I've already done German. But for this video, I'm really just going to be talking about German language content that Teach Yourself has put out. So if you are interested in learning German, perfect. If you're not, I would say that this can still be somewhat useful, but just know that the Complete German, the German Tutor, the Enjoy German book are not going to be the same necessarily as Complete Spanish, Enjoy Spanish, Spanish Tutor, or whatever language. So with all that said, we are going to get started with Complete German. I've said a lot that this is one of my favorite resources for language learning just of all time. This is definitely my favorite German resource that I've used, and this is also just in general one that all of these years later, I used this book probably about 5 years ago now. I still hold up as being kind of one of the best resources that I've used just in all of my language learning. I really love this book. So the Complete books as a series claim to take you from an absolute beginner A0 level up to a B2 level. Each chapter does have in the intro a nice little breakdown of all of the things you're going to learn in the unit, all of the topics you're going to cover, and then another breakdown based on the CEFR level of kind of where the concepts are coming from on that scale. This breakdown is both really nice for while you're going through the book book, being able to see an overview of what you're going to learn, but I think it's also nice because they are making this claim of taking you from A0 to B2, and having these concepts broken down by CEFR level just kind of shows where they're getting those numbers from. I don't necessarily know if I would say that by the end of this book I was at a B2 level, but I do think it brought me to a pretty solid level with my German. And I think a lot of that is just that while the book does obviously hit those concepts that are incorporated in the CEFR scale, so sure, I can, I don't know, talk about events that have happened in the past or whatever, there is not necessarily going to be the same level of speaking ability, of confidence, of vocabulary knowledge, etc. needed to actually be at those levels. It really is more so that you have approached the concept that is there for the CEFR level, but I think you need a little bit more practice in order to actually be at that level pretty solidly. I went through and did absolutely every exercise in this book as I went through it from start to finish, and I really enjoyed them. I feel like they were super helpful for solidifying concepts in my brain. They were just enjoyable to do. I genuinely laughed at some of the audios in this book, which is both obviously a ton of fun as you're going through it, but I think it's also just so great because by the end, I was feeling much more confident with my German. I think being able to understand an audio enough to laugh at it just gives you such a sense of confidence in your listening ability. So having audios that provided that opportunity, I think, was just so beneficial to my German confidence at the time. Overall, I just loved the inclusion of audios that came with this. I did get it when it still came with a CD. I believe now it's a download code. I'm not entirely sure about that, but that might be a con for some people if you don't have a CD reader and they are still doing CDs. Overall, I just really loved the audio inclusion. I feel like it really helps with listening comprehension, and they also had a few exercises that are based around speaking comprehension. There's a few where they're kind of conversations with blanks filled in for you to be able to speak, and a few others that are kind of more speaking prompts. Obviously, the speaking exercises can't entirely replicate an actual speaking practice environment with an actual human being, but I would say they felt pretty helpful despite being solitary. I, as I said, would not use them as a replacement for talking with an actual person at an actual conversational pace, but they didn't feel like a waste of time. They felt like they were quite useful given what they were. And I think it's really nice for a book like this where you are just kind of getting started in German if you are at more of that A0, A1 level. Sometimes it can be a little bit uncomfortable to try to have a conversation with an actual human when you feel like you only know maybe 20 words at the maximum. So I think having a kind of solitary practice environment to get you prepared to have actual conversations is just a really nice addition to this book. As a note though, the dialogues are read by, I think, 2 people total. There's a woman and a man. So you're not getting a wide range of different people, different voices, different dialects, different speaking styles, speeds, etc. While this is obviously helpful for learning in some senses, I do feel like when I went to Germany after finishing this book, I had a little bit more trouble understanding people who were using kind of different methods of pronunciation or word variations based on dialect. Overall, this is much more of a single type of standard German. Like, I found it very easy to understand people in Berlin, and I felt like my German really was able to feel like I had a decent level there. But when I was in Hamburg and kind of more of northern Germany, I had a little bit more trouble, and I definitely felt like my German level wasn't necessarily helping me as much as I was hoping it would. All of that can be fixed with supplemental stuff though. A lot of you know that I never recommend using just one resource. I always feel like it is good to even maybe have a main resource, but always supplement it with other things. And in this case, you could use just complete German, and then you could supplement it with maybe radio from other parts of Germany, or reading things with kind of more dialectal stuff, listening to things with more dialectal stuff. Just kind of supplementing the types of German you're listening to, so that way you're not just able to understand people who sound like the 2 people in this book. There are cultural notes thrown in throughout this book, and there is also kind of cultural information mixed into the dialogues. This book has really comprehensive grammar breakdowns and feels quite user-friendly in general. German was one of the first things that I self-studied other than the projects that I kind of dabbled in as a child and definitely failed a little bit more with. I had, up to this point, taken French in school, self-studied Esperanto, and then moved on to German. So I really didn't have experience with things like cases other than a little bit in Esperanto. I didn't really have confidence when it came to Germanic language. I didn't even really have that much confidence when it came to self-studying a language quite yet. But this book definitely helped me feel confident, and honestly I hadn't really done much more outside of this book when I went to Germany, and I was able to understand people and communicate and get around and just use my German in general. I'd say outside of this, really kind of the only things that I had done is more so immersion through watching children's TV and listening to music. I had not done kind of other more lesson-based things. The one thing that I did find lacking for me in this book was vocabulary. Though the B2 concepts are met conceptually and grammatically in this book, I do feel like I just needed a little bit more vocabulary to actually be at a solid and confident B2 level. This is sort of what I was saying earlier. I felt like I could express myself in all of the ways that this book wanted me to in terms of knowing how to do it. I just didn't have the words to do it, if that makes sense. But again, this can be so easily supplemented through learning vocabulary with flashcards or another book or conversation practice, etc. I just wasn't really doing that at the time. I adored the complete book, as I said, and so I went into the second Teach Yourself German book that I used, Enjoy German, with very high hopes, and I did not love it. This book claims to take you from a B1 level to a C1 level, and I will say that I think a lot of my dislike for this book comes from the fact that I definitely did not feel like a C1 after finishing this book, where I feel like I gained a lot from the complete book and really feel like my level just went up so much. I don't feel like I gained a ton from this book. There is the same topic and concept and CEFR breakdowns from complete in the start of each of these chapters. It's got very similar exercises as complete thrown in throughout it. It's written by the same exact people. Overall, it is a very similar book to complete, but I just feel like I did not have the same experience that I had with complete. Well, overall, this is a very similar book in terms of exercises, in terms of layout, in terms of structure, in terms of a lot of things. I think mainly because it was written by the same people and is also a teach yourself book. I just feel like it didn't hold my attention and enjoyment the way that complete did. I did not enjoy German while going through this book. And I think a lot of this is because the vocabulary in this book felt a lot less relevant. I know that I said that my one qualm with complete was probably that I didn't feel like I gained enough vocabulary in it, and I kind of felt like I would need to supplement that with something. And I think this book probably had somewhere around the same amount of vocabulary. It didn't feel like this book had necessarily less vocabulary. It felt like the vocabulary in this book wasn't really things that were making me enthusiastic to improve my German or made me feel like I was improving my confidence in German, or were things that I was really even going to use that often. I have a feeling that a lot of the vocabulary in this book is based on things that are known to show up in a C1 exam. I think when I really kind of realized this was there was a chapter on kind of like environmental problems and that sort of thing, and a lot of the vocabulary felt very specific. It didn't feel like what you would ever use in kind of a day-to-day conversation on global warming or climate change or the environment or things like that. It felt more like if you were reading a very specific scientific article in order to write a response for reading comprehension on it. And I just have a feeling that that is probably a part of the C1 exam. The best way to describe it for me was that it felt a lot like kind of instead of what I was learning just in normal French class versus what I was learning for the AP exam, it felt like one of those things where it was very much so test prep and not necessarily prep for just like your normal speaking habits. Overall though, I'd say that the vocabulary present in this book felt like a very weird mix of words. There are some things that do feel like things that you will use in day-to-day life, and then there are other things that feel like they are simply there because you're gonna have to read an article on that for an exam or in this book. One of the things though that I do really like about this book is that throughout it includes kind of tips about learning the German language, and not only does it include these tips, but the tips are entirely written in German. Weirdly enough, that's not really something that I've seen in a lot of textbooks that are written in English or in whatever your native language is for going to a target language. I just don't usually see tips written in the target language, but I think that that was a really nice touch to this book. This book felt like it should have been the continuation of complete. It is supposed to take you from pretty much the level of complete to the next kind of stage, and it was written by the same people, and it's from Teach Yourself, but the vocabulary, the audios, the exercises just feel like they weren't at the same kind of level of fun and engaging that they were in Complete. The other thing that I will say is I really, really wish that Teach Yourself would go back to kind of this fat rectangular shape for their books. They, I think, pretty much now are entirely printing in kind of this thin square kind of look. I know that the Tutor series is like this, the Enjoy series is like this, and I believe most of the Complete books are now looking like this as well. And while I do think that this shape actually really suits the Tutor book, which I'll talk about in a second, and just in general I think is really great for kind of reference style of books, I really, really think that this design fits the kind of Complete / Enjoy style of Teach Yourself books a little bit more. I think just the way that they lay out the pages and things works just so much better for this than it does for these thinner ones. And my theory is that probably like a thinner book is supposed to look a little bit less overwhelming than something like this that is a little bit thicker. But that's my one thing, Teach Yourself. I would love for books to look like this again. Speaking of which, German Tutor. This is the book that I have used most recently out of the three. I also did go cover to cover with this one. This book, same shape, same look as Enjoy German, but I will say, because I just realized this picking it up, it is significantly heavier. I don't know if that's really a pro or a con, I suppose that depends on you, but just know that she's got a little bit of weight to her. I was definitely a little bit worried going into this after Enjoy because I felt like it wasn't living up to my expectations after Complete, but I really enjoyed this. I'd say that this is probably my second favorite. I liked this almost as much, I think, as Complete German, which is saying a lot. I really liked this book. Interestingly, this book is not written by the same people as Complete and Enjoy. It has two different authors. This book claims to take you from the A2 beginner to B2 upper intermediate level. And it also claims that you can use it as a dip in and out resource alongside a course or something like that, or completely on its own. I do think you could use this book either way, but I definitely think that it works a little bit better as either a supplemental resource or as material to kind of refresh your knowledge of things that you have previously studied the way that I did. This book does cover a lot of what is in Complete and Enjoy, which makes sense since Complete claims to get you from A0 to B2 and Enjoy says B1 to C2, and that does overlap with this book's A2 to B2. However, all of the concepts in German Tutor that are present in the other two books are gone into on a much deeper level for a much better depth of understanding in this textbook, which is part of why I think it is such a great supplemental resource for if you are going through maybe Complete or Enjoy German, either while you're working through those or even afterwards, just to kind of reinstill material that you've learned. For example, I got a much better grasp on cases from this book just because it went into a little bit more. I got a little bit more practice with it. I was able to get a better understanding. This book also went really deep into sentence structure in a way that definitely was not present in Complete or Enjoy. I have a way better grasp on how to form sentences in German and have them not sound very strange or just be incorrect anymore. Speaking of which, I feel like the grammar instruction and breakdowns worked really well in this book. I feel like they were also very user-friendly, and I think they're written in a way that will both be helpful if you are someone who has studied a ton of languages or if you are someone who is kind of just getting started in it. That is definitely one thing I've noticed, is that some textbooks definitely explain things in ways that are much better for very beginners in language learning, people who don't have much of a working knowledge of parts of speech, about grammar concepts, etc. Whereas other books will be written in a way where you really already kind of need some sort of linguistic knowledge on grammar, etc. in order to kind of grasp it. But I feel like this book hit a very happy medium for me. I think that it was definitely written in a way that could be easily understood by someone who has not had a lot of experience with grammar, but at the same time I didn't feel like I was struggling to get through it because it was explaining concepts to me that I really did not need explained to me for the millionth time. There are no dialogues in this book, which is part of why I feel like this is definitely a better supplement to Complete or Enjoy or another course versus a full course to use on its own. I did not do all of the exercises in this book since I was using it as more of a refresher, but I did look over them and I did a few for concepts that I needed a little bit more work with, and I do feel like they were quite helpful, so I would say that the exercises are beneficial in this book. This book also includes kind of general language learning tips throughout the book, but I feel like there wasn't so much of kind of cultural tips or like facts throughout the book the way that there are in those other two books. Again, I feel like this book really lends itself to being a supplement. I think it does great with helping you grasp concepts present in those other books. It really helps you with learning how to learn a language, but I don't think that it really covers the full grasp of the German language or of just German culture in general the way that those other two books do. One interesting thing about this book and just kind of the Tutor series in general, at least this has been present in Italian and Spanish as well, is there will be vocabulary lists that are not translated. So you'll get just a list of German words and you'll have to go find the English equivalent to either kind of match the two or just to write in the English equivalent. I'm still not entirely sure how I feel about this. I can see it being a beneficial way to learn new vocabulary. Maybe it'll help it make it stick, but I also often found it frustrating at times just because I think it also is really dependent on you having good German resources and access to those at the time. Overall, I'd say I really liked this book. Like I said, I feel like I felt the way that I felt about Complete German with this, but I felt that way using this as a supplemental resource. I would not use this as just a full course on its own. I just feel like without the audio component that Complete and Enjoy have, and without some of the cultural elements and other things, I just feel like this book really works well for being done alongside it to really gain a better depth of understanding, or as a resource to kind of refresh or instill material after working through one of those books. I think that's really what this resource is great for, but I don't think that it's as great for being your sole language course. I think what I would recommend to someone who doesn't want to do this at the same time as one of those other resources is to go through Complete German. Then when you finish that, go through German Tutor to kind of instill that material that you just learned, and then move on to Enjoy German, just because German Tutor and Complete German do have a little bit more overlap when it comes to the level. I also think this book would be great for jumping around from various concepts to kind of relearn or instill that material, as opposed to kind of going cover to cover the way that I did. So overall, the level order for these books goes Complete German, then German Tutor, then Enjoy German with some overlap with the levels. And I'd say in terms of my enjoyment and recommendation of these books, I would put Enjoy German in last, then German Tutor, and then Complete German, as always, in the top spot. I would absolutely recommend German Tutor and Complete German. I cannot recommend them enough if you are learning German, especially if you're newer to self-study and kind of want a textbook to rely upon. I think these are great options. I'd say Enjoy isn't necessarily something I'd say to avoid at all costs or is a total waste of your money or things like that. But I'd say just think about why you want a more advanced resource. I think if you're studying for an exam or you're looking to do more academic things with German, I think that Enjoy German is great. I think if you're looking more to be able to express yourself in day-to-day life, or improve your confidence in German, or just improve your level to kind of be able to use German in more so daily situations, maybe it's not really the textbook for you. And then, so as a little bonus, I haven't actually used this book a ton, but I thought I would include it just kind of as another German book in the Teach Yourself series, German Verbs. I don't think that this book is actually printed anymore. I got this used for very cheap several years ago, so I really don't think this is a book that you're gonna frequently see from Teach Yourself nowadays. It's meant to be a reference. It has over 3,500 verbs, it says, but there's only about 200 of these actual kind of charts. Each of these pages has the verb, the definition, and then basically a chart with all of the conjugations of that verb for tenses and moods. It also includes some sample phrases of using that verb. One thing about this book is that all of this information is pretty easily found online, but if you'd like more of a tangible resource, or you know you are not going to have internet connection or something like that, it might be beneficial. It also, as I said, only has 200 verb charts, and then the other 3,500 verbs are just kind of in an index in the back. Just gives you the definition, kind of like a little dictionary just based around verbs. Either way, obviously it doesn't cover every verb in the German language. You are kind of limited there. And honestly, even though this information's found online, I think that this book is super helpful. I have not used it much, as I said, but I think I will try to in the future because it seems actually like something that I would find very easy and useful when it comes to writing. I wouldn't use this for speaking just because there are obviously quicker ways to get the information that you need. I'm not sure what I would rank this book. It really depends on kind of what your needs are. I don't think that this is a must-have book by any standards, but like I said, I think it is a helpful resource. I think especially if you struggle with kind of verb conjugation, it might be worth getting. My camera battery is about to die, so I'm about to do this intro so fast, but if there are any other resources or books that you would like to see me do reviews on, just let me know. I would also love to hear your opinions on all of these books if you've used them. I will see you next Wednesday, and remember, practice makes progress.